Thank you both so much for being here. We've been talking about climate and the role of art in building trust in climate conversations. And I wondered, as artists, can you talk to me a little bit about how you see that connection being made?
Mm. Art is the realm of emotion, of multiple dimensions of thinking and ways of being. And there's so many different ways that art can manifest in a conference. We've been blessed to have some opening performances teaching people about braiding in this year's 2024 conference. We've also had some artists who are doing installations and performances where you get to talk to someone about the piece. I think the core of it is there's an opportunity to reflect in a different way than it's just receiving information directly. So it adds a layer of interpretation. And especially when the topic is climate, the power relationships between someone who's immediately standing next to you is different than this idea, this proposition of the artwork. So there's an open-minded space that you can step into when relating to arts, creativity, imagination. That might be more bound if you're thinking about economics and business, but there are some really juicy intersections as well when you think about artists who use sustainable materials and bring that research to the people.
Yeah, I would just offer as well that when I think about art, I think about it as for me personally, I feel like it's an essential ingredient in how we're able to connect across knowledges. Art is inherently an intersensory experience depending on the sense that's activated when we think about music and sound or image and visuals. And we use it often even in the spaces that are considered artless. We have
Mm,
PowerPoint presentations, we have deeply eloquent speeches, and those are forms of art as well. But I think especially as an arts activist and someone who tries to translate deeply complex systems of oppression or campaigns into visceral experiences that people can understand. I think it really does connect to what you were speaking about around really tapping into the emotional landscape that they can then propel people to collaborate and to take action meaningfully. And we need that. We're really at a point in the climate crisis where I feel like art remains a very critical thread that needs to be tied into our solutions because the emotional pull of a creative practice is something that can unify different knowledges for us to be able to take action on and build for future generations.
That's great. It sounds like art helps facilitate conversation. Can you
Yes.
give me an example of where you've seen that happening, either here or out in your own art practice?
in our art practice, for me, my art practice is all about community building. So I'm always thinking about how can I bring people into my creative process and how can we make the artwork together? Collaboration is so essential. And for me, I lead from a place of curiosity and I invite other people to be curious with me and learn along the way and share along the way. That's where this role of facilitator comes in. And I think as much as I am like an artist exploring beauty and possibility through materials, I'm also a facilitator bringing human connection into the process of making an artwork because really the people who are involved in the process of making something feel more invested, feel a stronger sense of ownership and care. And so much of why I love art is that it's a platform for portals, right? Each work of art, each artist is a portal into another world, into another way of seeing, into a topic you may not have had access to unless that artwork was in front of you. Um, and the artwork, like you said, can be music, or it can be an installation, or it can be a performance, or it can be emergent. It can be a shared, like, witty repartee. There's been plenty of climate rappers, and I've been seeing them do some ciphers. So there's a spontaneous play component too. It doesn't always have to be the large scale commissions. Um, but I think in those spaces we have that vulnerability to connect more, and uh, not only art as a form of conversation, but art as a form of human connection.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, as I'm thinking about this question, a number of things are coming to me. I think about the legacy of art in social movements. I think about there was a speaker at our Future Leaders Summit that was closing out and like as a keynote and was talking to us about the role of music in the 70s and the anti-Vietnam War protests, and that a lot of protest music that emerged really sparked conversations that had to be had around current moments that are happening, around the current moments at that point that were happening. I think about really powerful collectives like Papel Machete in Puerto Rico that were able to use street theater to engage the very real lived conditions of oppressive governments and ways that the people needed to process these things so that the grief could be held together instead of isolated. I think a lot about that. And even more recently, too, a lot of the role of art has been showing up in places where the edge of comfort is really activated in ways that are generative, ways that we actually have to stir things up if we want to change the status quo. I think a lot about folks more recently happening. There's been a lot of wild momentum happening in the Bay Area more recently as well. Where we see artists, there was an exhibition called The Bay Area Now, there was a protest that happened where artists altered their own works to be in current solidarity with everything that's going on in Palestine at the moment. And I think that those are sort of the edgy conversations that I think we need to be able to have art used to process the intensity of the experiences around us and to honor them, because otherwise, I think the opposite of art is suppression. And I think suppression is painful because then we're never able to look at our own wounds. And I think that to be able to use art as a way to tenderly look at these wounds, to be able to witness each other's wounds, to be able to build cross-cultural empathy is such a powerful place to begin. And I think in these spaces a lot, I think we get dull. We dull our senses because the climate crisis is immense. And it's easier to look at things through the lens of numbers and of data because it seems like we can take action on those things. But when it comes to our own emotional landscapes and even our collective one, it's massive. And we need to have space for grief. We need to have space for all the human aspects of this crisis. Like, what's going to happen to our nephews, our nieces, our sons, our daughters, our communities, the places we love, the rivers, the mountains. Like, I think that's really where we need to begin.
It's interesting you talk a little bit about grief and processing grief, and I also know a theme at Aspen Ideas Climate is climate hope too. So the sort of the binary and maybe everything in between. And it seems like art can be almost its own language for helping people process either grief or hope or approaching something that might be an otherwise thorny conversation.
Yeah, and that's where I think that the space for curating art experiences and curating opportunities for people to meditate, be in their bodies, feel emotion, and even make their own versions of a piece through their own tactile sensory perception is crucial. Because there's a difference between being an observer, taking in a piece, and then actually being immersed in a performance or asked to braid something together. Or even actual immersive installations themselves can really open up a big emotional field. One of my favorite pieces in this 2024 conference is by a local Miami artist, Asser St. Paul. He's of Haitian heritage. I know him through his incredible surrealist paintings. And he now has these installations that are immersive. You sit in some kind of furniture, there's an inflatable. It's similar to the ones right behind us, actually. And in this one, you put headphones on, and suddenly it's a heartbeat. And the actual experience of kind of retreating into this cove with this beautiful scent of cozy cushions and then a heartbeat allowed me to retreat into my own heart space, to be reminded of heart-centered leadership in the middle of this whirring conference. I felt like was such a tactical direction, an invitation by the artist. Because when we're talking numbers, ideas, connections, it's so in the verbal realm, it's so in the outward space. So to go inward and go into our heart, tune into our own inner compass, our own emotions, then we can get to this idea of a center, of a truth, of a connection to self and whatever higher values guide us. And hold ourselves accountable to that authenticity as well. And there comes a space also for self-care, right? Because it can be a whirlwind to be in so many of these social spaces, to have artworks that not only open that collective effervescence, like Orion's piece. We did this beautiful scroll, and I invite you to talk more about it, but I was just blown away. It was a scroll that was being passed around person by person with each painting, and people were singing and tapping their thighs or their feet, and people were crying. I was crying. It was a moment of real collective effervescence, and we need those activations of what it's possible when you're a human being who can experience different ways of being, not just talking and thinking. And likewise, this piece with Aster St. Paul, where you go inwards and you go into this meditative space and you kind of get to turn off that like hyper arousal and come into a centered place of reflection.
I love all of that. Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like what's beautiful about the climate hope pieces you mentioned, I have deep gratitude for the ways that the Aspen Institute has created this space, this platform for folks to engage with diverse ideas and perspectives. I think that is a fertile place of hope. I think often about it in the metaphor of ecology, right? We have biodiverse biodiverse landscapes of species, flora, fauna, and it's actually in some of the most biodiverse places that we have the most vibrancy and the most splendor, right? And I think here, in another way, I think the convergence of many different leaders from science, from business, from arts, from advocacy, coming together to stir up the pot together is what's needed for us to move the dial. And to what you were speaking about too, just like how do we interrupt space and bring other. I think art sometimes can shift paradigms and kind of create new atmospheres. And I would even offer, like just even in this interview, to change that right now, actually, to share a song actually by Lou Aya of the Peace Poets that I think encompasses that climate hope that you're speaking about. And this song was created in the aftermath of the pandemic. It's very short. I'll just sing one part of it, one run of it. But it goes like this. We are hurting, but in this pain we're learning how to love our people from now on. We are growing, and finally we are flowing, wild like a river from now on. And to just just to be able to understand, like, what if this interview happened without that? What if we actually didn't speak about the fact that we actually have to move forward? We actually have to carry our grief, process it together, and move forward knowing that clear-eyed after a teary-eyed moment of staring into this crisis that's impacting all of us, we're actually going to continue showing up for our communities, continue showing up for our people with the deepest empathy that we can muster to be able to make better worlds for future generations. And we have to be brave. You know, I think artists are a powerful force for being able to expand our bravery, expand our sense of what's possible, and pave that. Imagination is a key ingredient in how we continue to build the world, build from this world what we need for the future.
It's just wonderful. I mean, listening to your singing and then being in the botanical gardens here in Miami Beach, surrounded by nature. You can hear some water behind us and the wind blowing through the trees. It really, and having the addition of the song really brings the moment to the present for me. It makes it very aware. And I think that that's part of what happens when you bring art into the conversation and helps people be present. So just to finish up our conversation, you're both future climate leaders, and can you talk a little bit about just briefly what that experience has meant for you as an artist and a future climate leader?
I think anytime people gather, especially at this scale with such a unity of purpose, it's a catalyst, right? So ideas that maybe would have taken a year to meet the right people or to think through, like, just got a major power up in the past 2 days. So it feels very much like I've been accelerated in my direction, and I'm so grateful for that. And then also to make such like incredible connections and see people further ahead on the path, like Orion, like, you know, so much love for the way that you carry your medicine. And from a place of like feeling like a deep mirror, actually, of like, oh, the way that you carry what you're carrying, I have those things inside of me and I want to bring this into this space. And then I needed to see someone doing it in order to feel that permission.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I feel like I feel very similar in that way. Like there's such a beautiful mirroring of what's possible, but shown in almost like a prism. Like, right? Like I feel like the future climate future leaders cohort, you know, this is my second year as an alumni, and being able to see folks that I think are always gesturing towards the future, but I think we are present leaders. Like we are all organizing actively in deep connection to our communities and to our issues. And what's powerful is that we see an ensemble story, right? And when I think about what you just said, and just kind of the idea of the prism, is that we're actually seeing different pockets of what's possible through the embodied work of each of these future leaders. Like folks are creating in real time the world that we want to build, and to be part of that, experience is so amazing and precious, and allows us to be able to continue to show up and mirror to each other that, hey, you got this, we can make this happen, and to be able to have a lifelong community of learners that just continue to show each other lesson plans. You know what I mean?
And also that little magical moment where you just get to play like matchmaker between people, and then it's like whole new universe being born. So that's also really exciting.
Yes.
Well, thank you both for your art and making connections and for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Wait, hugs.
Oh, well.
I know. I'm like,
Well, I guess, yeah. Thank you.